Well, good afternoon. Terrific crowd this afternoon, and welcome to Air and Space Warfighters in Action. Talking to you from our Air and Space Forces Association headquarters, I'm Worrell Wright, president of your AFA, and today we're going to have a truly fascinating discussion with a couple of terrific leaders from the 354th Fighter Wing out on the northwestern edge of the United States at Eielson Air Force Base in Alaska. Colonel Dave Ajax Berkland and Lieutenant Colonel Ryan Voodoo Worrell have just completed, along with their team, the bed down of the first 30 F-35s in Alaska. And together, they are preparing pilots for operations across the Arctic and Pacific Oceans. And just as important, they're preparing their maintainers, their crew chiefs. Before we begin, I want to thank all our sponsors whose generous support makes AFA's Warfighters in Action series possible. BAE Systems, Collins Aerospace, Dell Technologies, Elbit Systems of America, General Dynamics, Google Cloud, Gulfstream, L3 Harris, Lockheed Martin, Oracle Cloud, Pratt & Whitney, Raytheon Technologies, Rebellion Defense, SAIC, and the Roosevelt Group. Thank you. Well, now let's get to it. Our guests today exemplify, in my opinion, the daring young leaders throughout our Air and Space Forces. Colonel Ajax Berkland commands the 354th Fighter Wing. He's a combat-proven veteran of Operation Southern Watch, Northern Watch, Iraqi Freedom, and Freedom Sentinel. He's a former weapons school instructor and has previously commanded at the squadron and group levels. Lieutenant Colonel Voodoo Worrell commands the 356th Fighter Squadron, and as a commander is a combat veteran from Operation Enduring Freedom, a former weapons officer, former F-16 and F-35 instructor pilot. Heartfelt welcome to both of you, and thank you for joining us today. We understand the internet service on this non-secured line can be a little choppy way up north, so we'll hope for the very best, and we'll be confident that there'll be a great communications from you and the interaction we plan to have later. So with that, Ajax, Colonel Berkland, let's start with you. Now that the F-35 bed down is complete, what are your main priorities, and when do you expect to reach IOC and then FOC? And thanks again.
Thank you for the kind introduction, General Wright, and everyone who's dialed in. Appreciate having the opportunity to speak in this forum. Before I answer your question, sir, and we'll definitely get to priorities and what's up next for the 354th Fighter Wing, I just want to talk a little bit about this forum and why we're so excited to be able to speak and offer our perspective. When I heard about this probably a couple of months ago and saw the actual name of it, Warfighters in Action, I was immediately pretty excited to be able to talk about what's going on up here at Eielson, because we certainly over the last 2 years have shifted our culture and shifted the mentality towards a warfighting culture and a combat-focused mentality. And that goes across the board for our operations, maintenance, mission support, and medical airmen and teammates, as well as the fact that Warfighters in Action, we've had quite a bit of action going on here from Eielson throughout the Indo-PACOM area of responsibility, as well as back home. So right now we're wrapping up Red Flag Alaska 22-3, which is one of our 2-week multi-force major force exercises that we put on. We put on 4 of those a year, and 22-3 is really our high-end fight, our night one go to war type scenarios that we put on for the Indo-Pacific AOR teammates, allies, and partners. So we've got a lot going on in terms of action. So I was excited to be able to talk about that. And Voodoo's squadron, the 356th Fighter Squadron, the Green Demons, has been at the forefront of that. So it's great to have him to be able to share his perspective from the squadron level. And he's actually been the commander of an expeditionary fighter squadron a couple times now, where not only is he commanding operations, but maintenance and support functions at the squadron level, as well as the wing has conducted multiple dynamic force employment exercises, practicing our agile combat employment tactics, techniques, and procedures, working on multi-capable airman capabilities, as well as agile logistics from austere locations throughout the Indo-Pacific, like the rest of the Air Force is doing across the globe. So this is an awesome opportunity. When you ask the question, sir, as far as what's next, so when I think back to for everyone's awareness, General Wright was out last summer, July and August, for our air show to visit. And sir, at that point, we were about halfway there in terms of our F-35 bed down. And so since that time, and finally in April of this year, we got our 54th of 54 F-35s here at Eielson, which at that point makes Alaska as a state the largest concentration of 5th gen combat coded air power in the world. And not only do we have all that iron between Eielson and Elmendorf to the south with their F-22s, but those two bases bracket the J Park, so our Joint Pacific Alaska Range Complex, which you don't have to ask me. You can ask any of these Red Flag Alaska participants what they think of the J Park, and they'll tell you that it's the best training airspace in the world. So we were actively engaged to try to upgrade the J Park, to expand it vertically and horizontally in coordination with our partners here in Alaska, as well as upgrade the threat replication capability on the surface as well as the air. So that's kind of what's been going on here. As far as our priorities over the next year, now that we have completed the 54 aircraft bed down and kind of gotten the basics out of the way, our priority now is to basically shift ourselves into full operational capability to conduct agile combat employment operations throughout the Pacific AOR at austere locations. So that for us, that means that we need to be able to run hub and spoke operations with our full complement of 5th gen combat air power. So that is really our focus. To do that, we have to be able to obviously deploy our 5th gen air power rapidly into the AOR, and then at the same time we do that, we're going to be still conducting advanced training here at Eielson. So that's kind of our second line of effort that's always ongoing. And then the third line of effort for us at Eielson, and something that we're still pretty proud of, is the fact that we, because of Alaska's strategic location, we continue to bed down rotational forces that come up to Alaska because of that key strategic location. So it kind of blows people's minds when I tell them that here in Alaska, going back to what Billy Mitchell would talk about in the 1930s, that whoever holds Alaska holds the world. But here we are, for example, we are closer to Tokyo than Honolulu is to Tokyo. And you don't get that if you look at a map, but if you look at a globe, or you turn the map on the north side of it, where Alaska isn't stretched out over the top, you'll see that is in fact true, and that we can really, in a single fighter sortie, range just about any AOR in the Northern Hemisphere pretty easily, which alludes to what Billy Mitchell was talking about. So now, because of that, we do bed down quite a few rotational forces up here at Eielson. So that is ongoing, and something that, again, we're pretty proud of, that we put on those types of events here with our installation. So that hopefully that answers your question, sir, about kind of what's next for us. Voodoo, do you have any fill-ins from your end about what you see coming up?
I think the biggest thing that we're starting to see is, as both squadrons fully flesh out, we have the capacity to run full exercises with 48 F-35s. We can easily integrate with the Raptors down from the south. So we do integration on a quarterly basis with the Raptors on the J Park, which is something that, I haven't been able to do at any other CAF squadron. We can call the bros down the street and say, hey, let's get the team together that's going to be our night one team, and we can train within a single sortie. Has been a big advantage of being here in Alaska.
Absolutely. And honestly, I've been pushing these guys, hey, why are you not doing more of that integration? Why are we not doing it every day? From BFM all the way through the more complex missionized scenarios. And the reason is that it requires a lot of planning and coordination, and to do it right, as these guys, as well as the 355th, the Fighting Falcons, have done, to do it right, it requires a lot of planning. So think on the order of like a red flag type of planning, but conducted at the squadron level. And Voodoo's weapons officer has a day job as well. He can't just block off weeks in a row to plan a red flag type scenario. So that's why we're not doing more of it. But honestly, the squadrons have done a fantastic job of integrating integrating those events into their phase-based training plan, so that they will build up from the basic mission sets to these advanced, very complex missionized scenarios. And those are synchronized with the upgrade flows for the pilots, synchronized with the upgrades for the intelligence airmen back in the vault, and done a really good job of weaving those into their normal training plans. So between the two F-35 squadrons, plus the fact that we've got the aggressors here at Eielson, which every day our aggressors are supporting either our F-35s or the third wing F-22s down at J-Bear. That on the biggest airspace that I know of, the J-Park is the size of the state of Indiana, which alludes to the size of Alaska. If anyone on the line is from Texas, I apologize up front, but if you were to cut Alaska in half and make it into 2 states, Texas would be then the third biggest state after the 2 Alaskas. So it's a really big state, and that is represented by the size and the scale of the J-Park that we get to train on every single day. If we just drive out the east side of our base, it actually connects right to restricted area 2205, which is part of the J-Park. So we kind of live right in the middle of the airspace, and we're very fortunate for that. But we get some great training out of that. Sir, does that answer your question?
Bet. That's a great start. What we might do here for both of you is to sort of take advantage of your experience, your F-16 experience, for example, for Vudo. How do you best describe, and you're the experts, on what the F-35s, F-35 capabilities bring to the fight? And for AFA, we try to reinforce that why and the relative attributes of the F-35 constantly with Congress, with the public. And as you well know, many of those we try to explain the F-35 capabilities to really have very little background in combat aircraft or even in military operations. So as you support the Indo-PACOM commander, as you support certainly SACEUR, both theaters you can reach pretty well, as we try to build credible deterrence capability, looking at obviously the pacing threats of Russia and China. If you can kind of go from what the F-35s bring to the fight in a sort of a public description, and then what that really means to deterring the Chinese and the Russians. So, and you got as much time as you want to try to articulate that, both of you. You just bring probably more experience than you might give yourself credit for, previous experience in previous airplanes, and now what the F-35 brings to the fight.
Start with this, Lou.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a couple easy analogies that I usually use when somebody asks, hey, you switch to the F-35, what's it like? Is it better? Why is it better? The F-16 is still a great platform and a great asset that we definitely use and need in the Air Force. The big difference that I see between the two is an analogy kind of to cars. So you can have an awesome 69 Mustang that is a blast drive. It goes fast. It makes a lot of great noise, and it still does the job extremely well. But then you can compare that to a Tesla, which is a newer, modernized, more computer-based system. And some of the things you're doing are less about driving the car and more about managing the decisions that you're making internal to it. And I would make that analogy to the F-35 pretty quickly, is that the F-35 brings a lot more sensors SA and a lot more automation into how the sensors provide information to the pilot, so that I'm no longer running the radar. I'm no longer trying to manage where my radar is looking to get the correct aspect on something. Now, there's still some pieces I'll do to that, but it's much more about what decisions is the pilot making in the cockpit now. And that has changed how we've started to train our 4 ships and our wingmen. And we talk a lot about, how much autonomy do we give our wingmen? Where in the previous days, your wingman was visual. Now that has still changed as data links have continued to flourish in the F-16 and the Strike Eagle, and there is a lot more autonomy in their wingmen as well. But specifically to F-22s and F-35s, having somebody who's now, instead of 1 mile away from you, he's now 5 to 20 miles away. He needs to be in position, making the same decision for what the foreship is intending to do. And the jet really enables that from a sensors perspective of the awareness that he has around the battle space. We regularly find ourselves flying on an 80 or 160 mile scope to be able to see the things that our jet has already detected and make the decisions on those. The other piece of that would then be that the survivability piece is having an aircraft out there on its own. Usually we kept people close for mutual support, that you could see and detect a visual intercept. You could point out a SAM launch. A lot more of the automation that's built into the aircraft now helps increase that survivability of, hey, I know that I'm being shot at, or I know what is approaching me, and I can make those decisions on that timeline. That'll be the big difference in a very narrow focus to the F-35 itself. The second piece that really goes out of that is the ability to command and control the assets around you. And we saw some of that this summer, where we took our show on the road, if you will, out to Valiant Shield and other exercises in the Pacific. And we did a lot of operations over the water. And so a lot of operations with tankers, a lot of operations with other fighters in the AO. And what we saw come out of that was a lot of maturity in our aviators that was just building in that aviation skill set of managing the assets around you, helping take care of the tanker, which is always a fragile thing when you're out over the water. One tanker falls out, you just lost 100,000 pounds of gas that you needed to keep a couple foreships up. And so you're constantly involved in continuing to solve that problem. And because it's less about specifically flying the aircraft and managing the sensors and more about making those decisions, you have the brain space to actually start to work through that. So we saw a lot of benefits from the F-35 in helping making decisions for the package when we're out there. And we've seen that grow a lot in our community as being very strong seed and escort package leads as far as our focus and training our leadership in the air.
Yeah.
Ajax?
Yes, sir. I would agree with everything Voodoo said. And, my perspective coming into the F-35 was before I got to Eielson, I was at Bagram flying F-16 over Afghanistan. And I found out that I got this job. And so I knew that I would be transitioned to the F-35. And honestly, I kind of scoffed it. I thought, hey, this will be easy. It's a Lockheed jet, single engine, side stick, got some buttons and switches on the throttle, and I bet you it'll be easy. And what I didn't realize and what I didn't fully grasp was the kind of the fundamentals of what makes a fifth gen airplane, fifth generation. And those will be two things, stealth and sensor fusion that Voodoo talked about. And that sensor fusion, let me just talk about the stealth. When you compare the F-35 to the F-16, which by the way is the love of my life, the F-16, but the F-16 simply can't go places that the F-35 can go. So when you look at different AORs and the anti-access area denial capability that certain competitors are pursuing, the F-16 can't get into some of those places, at least not and once there, the sensor fusion capability that Voodoo talked about enables a degree of situational awareness that you just really would struggle to get in any kind of fourth gen platform. So I think those are kind of the two key differences in what they enable in the F-35. It's a great airplane. It's obviously the newest fifth gen airplane coming off the line. And it's a great airplane for all the reasons we talked about. We need it, and we need to continue to upgrade it and make sure that we're keeping up with pacing competitors that are obviously moving out pretty quickly in this arena.
Well, I can assure you that for many elder fighter pilots on the net today, we could not be more proud of you, and also a bit jealous. Ajax, could you talk just a little bit more, and obviously this is unclassified, describing for the public the reality of advanced technology threats that China possess today as they've ramped up their capabilities, surface to air and air to air, and certainly threats that you constantly analyze, not just to defend against, but to kill, target and kill. So could you talk a little bit, or both of you, about how the F-35 and how your wing integrated with other forces, obviously, pays attention to, respects modern threats, but at the same time, you're going to go after them and turn them into targets, if you will.
Absolutely. So, part of the answer to that has to do with the F-35 and the capabilities that we talked about. I think the other part to this dynamic for us here at Eielson has to do with the JPark. So when you look at what the advanced threats are doing, they're becoming more lethal, and they're becoming more lethal at further and further ranges in terms of the ability of an air defense system to detect, target, and then engage our joint forces. Those ranges are just getting further and further. So having a range like the JPark and having all the 5th gen assets between us and 3rd Wing down at Elmendorf enables us to train to that high-end fight. It enables us to have the space to innovate tactics, techniques, and procedures to survive and be lethal in that advanced threat environment. I think that's the best way I can answer that at a sort of an unclassified level. We're definitely watching very closely all the developments across the globe that our competitors are pursuing, and we're training to that every day. Voodoo, any fill-ins?
I think the other piece I would add to that is that when we are training to those advanced threats, we've found that stealth is not necessarily the ultimate answer, but it is an entry-level requirement. In that if you're not bringing your A game from the beginning, you don't have additional flexibility to continue to do those other things, because the threats are continuing to spread in the electromagnetic spectrum. They're not staying in the X band. They're spreading out across the whole EMS, and that still enables us to decide and determine ways to defeat that. And direct, indirect terrain masking and bringing the whole force to bear is another big piece of what we are continuing to work on in the JPark, in that it is not just a 4-ship of F-35s. It is an 8-ship of F-35s. It is 4 Raptors. It is 3 Growlers. It is integrating our Australian partners up here with the wedge tail and bringing in all the other non-kinetic effects that we can, and during those red flags where we can sit down, and if we may not be able to do it open, we can do it tabletop and understand the capacity of where that is going to be an enabler in the fight.
Outstanding. Quick yes, no question, and then we'll go to our media participants today. So get ready. I'm going to go to Amanda Underwood first, and then Brian Eberstein. But quick question before we go to the media: do you integrate Guardians now into your red flag exercises? Are there Guardians on scene or National Reconnaissance Office liaison officers? Are you effective? I know you are. Just for your description of integrating overhead capabilities into red flags.
The answer is yes. We integrate all domains into our Red Flag Alaska exercises. It's something that we're working on ramping up, to be quite honest, because that is a domain that obviously is ever more important and potentially a vulnerability that we need to shore up. And again, Red Flag Alaska is the perfect place to do that.
Outstanding. Well, with that, we'll go to Amanda Miller and then Brian Eberstein. We could talk all day, but we'll go now for about 30 minutes and we'll go around the audience. We have 300 plus signed in today. Thank you all so much for participating. Obviously, we won't get to all of you, but I'll try to get to as many as possible. If you would try to make your question a question and leave time for others to ask questions I know they want to ask. So with that, Amanda and then Brian.
Hi, thank you. Can you hear me?
Can.
Yes,
Okay.
ma'am.
To Colonel Berkland, at the beginning, you mentioned a lot of events have been taking place in the Indo-Pacific. I wonder if you could elaborate on like what you were watching most closely, what it looked like from your perspective.
As far as what we're watching most closely, I think I can maybe start with where the 354th Fighter Wing lies in terms of the command relationship. So the 354th Fighter Wing is assigned to U.S. Indo-PACOM. And so we are not a service-retained fighter wing like you would see, for example, in Air Combat Command, like the fighter wing at Hill Air Force Base is an ACC-owned service-retained fighter wing, and as such is a force provider. But we were assigned to Indo-PACOM, and so that's our area of responsibility that we focus on. And so when it comes to us deploying forces throughout the AOR, I won't get into details about that, but I can just tell you that the goal of those exercises and the goal of those dynamic force employment events is to ensure a free and open Indo-Pacific. And so by doing these and demonstrating our ability to rapidly mobilize and deploy across the AOR and conduct operations from unfamiliar locations via ACE type operations, we're doing what we can to ensure a free and open Indo-Pacific region.
And one other quick follow-up, maybe sort of related. What kind of experience do the pilots have? You mentioned you guys changing aircraft. What in the new squadrons, what is their background like?
It varies, and Voodoo can answer this better than I can, but we have everything from, we have a few pilots that came out of the pilot training next endeavor, where they did considerably less actual flying. They did a lot of virtual reality type simulated flying, and they have performed brilliantly, to be honest. And then we have old retreads like Voodoo and myself with, a couple thousand hours in a different airframe. And those airframes run the gamut of fighter aircraft across the Air Force that we get people in from the A-10, the Strike Eagle, the F-15C, obviously the F-16 as well. And then some of our people have grown up in the F-35 as well. So it kind of runs the gamut. And that is a challenge for the community. The F-35 community at large is to establish sort of a common way ahead in terms of standardization, what our tactics look like, because to some degree we have baggage from a different aircraft and a different culture. So our goal, and I think we've done an effective job, is to take the best of all those cultures, take the best of all those tactics and techniques and procedures, and blend them into what we're doing with the F-35. Voodoo, any fill-ins from your perspective?
From the experience standpoint, we definitely have every MDS represented, but we have a lot higher quantity from previous F-35 experience starting to flow in. So the community has really developed and grown to the point where it is sustaining its own culture now, and it is less about trying to determine what the culture is and more about bringing new people in to the F-35 community. And so the experience here has been amazing, how easy it is to be on the same common line. And we even see that across services and across alliances. Example of that, last fall, we actually had the Australian F-35s up here, and we flew as mixed formations with them. So 2 of them and 2 of us in a 4-ship, connected on MATL, all speaking the same tactics, all executing the same tactics from our tactics manuals. And it was incredible to be a part of that. Throughout the rest of the year, we've then done similar integrations with the Marine Corps B models when we've been out at Iwakuni, and then we've had them out here as well during Red Flag. So you really see the synergistic effects of the F-35 when you start to just put more F-35s together from different communities. It doesn't matter where you come from. You're flying the same airplane, you're checking in, and you're able to speak the same language and execute the same tactics together.
Yeah, that's a really good point. So last summer, I got a chance to lead a 4-ship on day 1 of the flag with the Aussies up here. And when I lead, I always have a really strong number 3. I make a point of it. And in this case, my number 3 was an Australian instructor pilot, as well as number 4 was an Aussie. And it was just like Voodoo described. It was absolutely seamless. Once you figure out the accent, it was all the communications, all the standards in terms of admin coming and going is all the same. I got a chance to fly in the red flag yesterday, and I was alone and unafraid at the end of the vol. Everybody else said RTB to my four-ship, and as we typically do at the end of those missions, you try to rejoin as many fighters as you can, at least a four-ship, to try to compress the RTB train. And I found myself in a three-ship of Marine Corps F-35Bs. I rolled over to their aux frequency and told them I was saddled up in the formation and we're going home. And everything they said on the radio from that point on out is exactly the same way we do it here at Eielson, as well as the way they do it down at Eglin, and I'm sure the way that they're doing it at Lake Neath. So from a partner standpoint, from a joint standpoint, Voodoo makes a great point that I think the community has done a great job of standardizing and really harnessing the commonalities across those multiple nations and services that the F-35 brings.
Thanks.
Well, terrific. I can say this. I think today's generation of fighter pilots is probably smarter than the elders in the previous generation. So great answers. Let's go to Frank Wolf and then Mike Gordon.
Yeah, hi, it's Frank Wolf at Defense Daily. I just wondered in terms of the mission capability rates right now for the 354th, sort of where you're standing. I assume it's fairly high, but I just wanted to, and also if you had any ideas on any improvements you might like to see for sustainment of the 54 that you have. And is there anything that you think could be improved there?
Yeah, great question. I don't know what our MC rate is today, but I can tell you that it is significantly better than anything I've ever seen before. Anytime we do a generation exercise, phase one ORE is what we'll call them. Maintenance outperforms our expectations, and on a daily basis, ops has a tough time keeping up with maintenance here. Voodoo's nodding at that. I mean, really, it comes down to pilot availability in terms of the number of lines that we can put up on any given day. So that has been fantastic. Some of that is the fact that we have very new airplanes, but I think a lot of it has to do with the amazing team that we have up here that takes pride in doing all the little things right. We have a motto that we're ready to go at 50 below, which it does get to that temperature at certain times of the year. Today is a beautiful 70-degree day, but if you come back in February, you'll see that it's a fairly ominous environment to maintain and support and operate airplanes out of. But our team has a sense of discipline and a culture of discipline of doing the little things right, because frankly, there are no shortcuts other than discipline up here. If you don't follow the tech order, if you don't do all the little things right, if you delay maintenance actions, you are going to pay for it when it's 50 below and dark out all day long. So that I would give our team a lot of credit for that, particularly our maintenance and support team for that. In terms of sustainment, we're very interested in the Block 4 upgrade to the F-35. We're very interested in once again just continuing to upgrade the airplane to keep pace with competitors and what the air defense systems are doing out there every day. So that would be, if I could just characterize one of the biggest challenges that I see looking towards the future, it is continuing to rapidly evolve the F-35 capabilities to stay in front of what competitors are doing.
Great. It looks like we need to shift, let's see, to Kimberly Underwood. Kimberly, are you out there? Okay. How about Mike Fantini and then John Venable? Tom Deal. Let's see. How about Tom Deal? Well, I'll be glad to fill in here then. Let me ask you to talk a little bit more about overall support for the families. Family readiness is combat readiness. In our upcoming Airspace and Cyber Conference, Shireen Brown's going to talk about Five and Thrive, Molly Riemann about spouse programs across the Space Force. Having been a wing commander, I know, and a squadron commander, you all focus in many ways on your families as much as you do on your fighter pilots, and certainly both officer and enlisted families. It's one big team, and certainly a community like Eielson, all working together in the higher calling of your 354th mission. So could you talk a little bit about families, the role of families, and what we might do, all of us, in support for families across Eielson?
Absolutely. No, and it's a great point. You know, we talk a lot about the mission, but it all comes down to the families that are up here, the airmen that are up here with their spouses, their dependents, and to include the local community. So we do have some challenges up here, no doubt, that have been, I would say, highlighted by the influx of not only the people and the equipment for the F-35 mission, but the surge in operations. So we have housing challenges. Many people probably are aware that back in April, we suspended automatic concurrent travel of dependents, so that we didn't have airmen coming up here for 3 years and living out of a hotel room with their family, or settling for housing that was something we wouldn't consider to be adequate. We are pretty much maxed out on base. We have all of our houses filled, and we have a significant wait list to get people into housing as a result of those being filled up and not having a lot of options out in the community. So those are challenges. And I come back to the family, that word of family, and that is really what we are up here, and what I'm very proud of. That everyone who comes up to Eielson immediately falls into this family that is Team Eielson. And so I would say, as we work through those challenges, that is what is keeping people. It's what's keeping people going. I think our airmen, in particular, morale is extremely high, because as the mission volume has surged, so has the sense of esprit de corps, so has the pride in what is going on, and the airmen really have a sense of why they're being asked to do what they're asked to do. You know, if you were at Eielson 10 years ago, you would see this place as being somewhat busy in the summers when we're putting on our red flag exercises in Northern Edge. And then come fall, wintertime, the aggressors would go on the road. This place would kind of shut down until the next summer. And if you weren't doing anything, then, you know, fishing was the mission. And that is not the case anymore. So just today, you know, we're going to launch a red flag ball, which is a pretty massive, air power event in and of itself. And as soon as that red flag recovery happens, the Demons are going to launch a 12 front right in between the two red flag goes, which is something that, in terms of the amount of iron that we're putting up in the air, you never would have seen that before. So it is staggering in terms of the volume of air power, the amount of mission that our team here is supporting. And so morale is high because our airmen are well trained, they're well equipped, and they have that sense of esprit de corps. But that falls back on the families in terms of the housing and the childcare and all those challenges. So I think that's what's getting us through it, is that sense of family. And our team is aggressively attacking these housing problems. We've converted our lodging spaces, a considerable amount of our lodging spaces into permanent party dormitories. We've rebanded our rank bands on base housing because we had houses that were not being filled. They were in field grade officer housing, and we've said, hey, I made the decision. I'm not going to let a junior NCO not get a house just because of their rank. I'm going to put them in right next to a lieutenant colonel if I have to. So we've done that. We've really kind of maxed out all of our capacity on base, and thus far we've gotten through it. We have not had to bring any airmen up here unaccompanied, except for a few that decided to do it of their own volition because they wanted to come out and scout out the housing firsthand and then bring their dependents up. So to this point, we've been able to get through it with a lot of aggressive teamwork here from from our family that you alluded to. But I think that as we move forward, any help we can get, I mean, we're engaged with the local community. They understand our housing needs. We're kind of in the perfect storm as we got into COVID and we saw the building prices go up of everything down to a 2x4 to astronomical levels. And now, you have the added complication of a very short build season here, where, for about 9 months of the year, you're not doing a whole lot of construction because it's just so cold. And so we have a short build season and we are digging our way out of it. And I certainly, if there's one message to get out of this, it is that Eielson is an awesome place to be. It is isolated. Geographically, it is dark and cold in some of our months. It's a land of extremes and it's an adventure across the board. So there's amazing stuff to do here in the winter. And the summers are second to none as we're experiencing right now. And we're working through these challenges. And I think it goes back to that sense of family, that sense of team that's allowed our people here to aggressively get after those challenges. And thus far, without any disruption to the mission and without any real impact on quality of life or resiliency here. We're very fortunate. If we look across the base or across town at Fort Wainwright, they have invested millions of dollars in quality of life initiatives, and they are struggling with resiliency over there. And fortunately for us, we have built a culture of family and of empowerment of our airmen and of answering the why, about why you're up here, why you're doing what you're doing, why you working these long hours. And I think the team really understands that. And if they don't, they just wait about 20 minutes and then we'll launch another, 8 jets, and they'll remember that everything that everyone is doing at the space. I like to use General Kelly's analogy of air power being kind of like oxygen. All of our support airmen on the space are kind of like oxygen. You don't appreciate that POL troop who's refueling your airplane until you don't have gas. And then you realize that I simply can't do this without gas. So that's just one example of, I think our airmen are getting that message, and that goes down to our, frontline supervisors who get it and are coaching and mentoring our young airmen about why what they do is so important and why what their families are doing is so important for our nation.
Amen. And thanks, by the way, to both your spouses. I happen to know that being a wing commander or being a squadron commander is a team effort. So please pass on our thanks. I hope they're watching today. Let's move a little bit. There's a lot of questions. I'm going to facilitate a little bit. A lot of interest. There's press out there that's probably not fully informed about the reliability of the F-35, how easy it is to maintain or not maintain compared to the F-16, for example. So kind of putting together those questions, could both of you talk a little bit really on behalf of your maintainers who are world-class, just as world-class as you are. I know you would say that. And by the way, I'm only alive because of great maintainers and crew chiefs. But talk a little bit about F-35 reliability, and actually working, in fact, with your tech reps, working directly with industry, if not the JPO, to ensure you have the reliability you can count on in your F-35s and keep turning them and keep turning and burning. So please.
Yeah, absolutely. We haven't seen any reliability issues, to be totally honest, and that goes back to what I mentioned in terms of our phase 1 generation exercises. It goes back to the multiple deployments that we've conducted with our F-35s in the Indo-PACOM AOR. We have not seen any reliability issues. One of the challenges that we are working on is reliability when you're conducting disconnected operations, when you're not necessarily connected to Alice. And we have seen some of that as a challenge. We are working through that, and it has not been a mission stop, but anything that we can get from the industry, certainly from Lockheed Martin, to help us navigate that. That's really what we're looking to do in the future, is more of that type of austere operating location type ops with hub and spoke scenarios. That's where I see the next challenges coming down. But thus far, reliability has not been an issue for us.
This question kind of goes along the lines of, and you already alluded to it, reliability and ACE and having the amount, the transport you need, C-130 support, for example. But I think you hit right on it, Ajax, and both of you, and you've got a terrific experience right now that would update all of us. When we do agile combat employment, the connectivity to essentially your supply chain, right to even to Fort Worth or to Northrop Grumman spaces, where you're really going to shorten, if you will, the supply chain, which is really a kill chain in its own way. Could you talk a little bit about that and what you see as both lessons learned and help us all understand how to support you in articulating how to make ACE work?
Yeah, I'll start and then I'll let Voodoo fill in with his perspective. But recently we were at Marine Station Iwakuni in Japan, and I'll just highlight kind of one anecdote that I think shows some of the challenges and something we'd like to see refined in the future. We needed a part for one of our F-35s. We are looking at that part there at Iwakuni because the Marines have it and they've got it available. We have to go back through Lockheed and through some degree of bureaucracy to get approval to source that part, which may or may not come from Iwakuni, though it's there and available for us. And that is just my simplistic view on an understandably complex system. But if we could get more flexibility in that arrangement so that we can actually source that part more flexibly, I think that would be a game changer for us. Voodoo, any feelings from squadron level?
Yeah, I think the other challenge that we've seen is the logistics train of how long sometimes it takes to get something to a place if it's not there, and advocating for the right priority of when it needs to be there. And being in Alaska, we are kind of at the end of the logistics train for most of our parts and supplies, and a lot of the models have gone to the part is ready at time of need, not necessarily as a bench stock. And so there's a couple of initiatives we're working, particularly with flight equipment, to make sure that we have a bench stock available. Because if I take away a pilot's helmet, he's not going to fly. And the way that it's built and each helmet being custom fit per pilot creates more of a problem waiting for that new DU to come in, which may take 5 or 6 days versus just having a couple extras on the backside. And then we'll bring those with us when we're out on that ACE event. That then becomes our caution, is when we do go on an ACE type event or any expeditionary event, is how much do you bring? Do you bring the whole kitchen sink or do you bring just enough? And the pieces that we're working through, tailoring those cargo loads to bring just what we need to sustain the initial operations, under the assumption that we're going to have a follow-on backfill, and we have to then have reliable communications to communicate what we need on that 2-week out shipment that's coming in. And so those are the challenges when it comes to the expeditionary piece, maintaining that communication and be able to clearly advocate for what's going to happen for the pieces we might need.
Yeah. It almost sounds like supply chain tactics, techniques, and procedures. If you want to make ACE work, in the old days, we had a MICAP capability in every wing, and the world's smartest staff sergeant constantly on the net with a depot or where that tracking were always scarce numbers of parts, or that one part that made the difference between flying that next day or not. So your thoughts on just recommendations, lessons learned on, and you kind of alluded to it already, Ajax, get the bureaucracy out of the way and get the smart maintainers, if you will, at the wing, if not deployed squadron level, in touch with the right people to flow that part. And you're not going to be able to take a huge risk kit or reserve kit with you all the time. So just some thoughts, and this is all about all of us being more educated and trying to advocate for you and educate the public.
Yeah, I think you hit it on the nugget, sir. As far as the F-35 enterprise is a complex one. It's not just joint; it's multinational, and so we have to navigate that. Any increased flexibility we could have at our level to navigate that more expeditiously, more intelligently. I would be all for it, knowing that it's complicated. Anything we can do to streamline that would be very welcome from my perspective.
Outstanding. We're going to wrap up here in a few minutes. Before we do that, I think many of us would like to just be in the cockpit with you on a daily basis. So could you take a few minutes and talk to all of us like you would talk to your brothers, sisters, moms, dads, who may or may not have had the opportunity to fly airplanes. So you jump in an airplane, you've got a target out there some X miles away, and again, it needs to be unclassified. It could be a surface-to-air threat. It could be an air-to-air threat. What kind of process do you go through in the cockpit and with others? And let Ajax start, and then I know Voodoo can fill in, and then we'll wrap up. Put us in the cockpit with you for just a few minutes.
Yeah, it's I mean, the first thing when you climb up into the cockpit that you'll notice is that, hey, where are all the switches? Where are all the buttons? Well, it's all up on the glass, you know. So you'll see the pilots that fly this, the amazing men and women we have here with gloves that are cut off on these three, or thumb and two fingers, because you're constantly up on the glass, and that is where that touchscreen capability, it's where basically all of your functions reside. And then everything else is HOTAS, so everything else is hands-on throttle and stick. So in terms of your ability to continue to fly the airplane while you're working the sensors and while you're queuing weapons and building situational awareness, you never really have to take your hands off the throttle and stick except to touch the glass. And then when you do that, the autopilot functions in the F-35 are considerably more advanced than certainly that I'm used to coming from the F-16. So you can set up the parameters that you need, whether you're doing a SAR map of a target site, or you are pushing in on an air-to-air wave. The airplane can pretty much fly itself once you put it in the right parameters. And that goes back to the formations that Voodoo talked about, because you're not welded wing out there with somebody within visual range of you in formation, you're allowed to then, put your focus on the glass and your sensors. And then in terms of, you talked about air-to-air, air-to-surface, that's all very seamless. So those tracks will populate all at the same time. It's very evident which is which. And so then it's just back to the pilotage and the airmanship that we're building in these young pilots to determine what the priority is. And because of the multi-role capability of the F-35, oftentimes the priority is yes. The priority is we're going to deal with all of this at once and work together as a formation and as a package to deal with multiple threats that are extremely lethal and do so simultaneously. So it's really fun to fly. That's kind of the high-end fight. I got a chance to fly my IPUG high aspect BFM ride with one each Voodoo, and it was awesome. So back to BFM, and there's a lot of debate visual arena, and I would say that it is not designed to be a dogfighter per visual range maneuvering is, and what maybe some of its weaker areas are. Then it comes down to the pilot and having the awareness of exploiting your advantages while taking advantage of what the bandit is doing and maybe doing wrong. It's a very capable platform from that perspective and very fun to fly. Coming from the F-16, just to talk strictly pilot terms, the angle of attack capability of the F-35 is pretty cool. The ability to pull lots of AOA and put your nose on something, whereas in the F-16 you weren't necessarily able to do that because of the AOA limitations on it. That's a cool capability. The engine's great, at least in terms of thrust. It's got a lot of thrust. You can accelerate very quickly. Certainly to the Mach, you'll get there probably faster than anybody. And then once you hit the Mach, the F-22 will probably pass you by and keep going. But it's a great airplane. It works very well out here on the J Park. I can tell you from flying lots of low levels and as well as doing a lot of high altitude stuff across the board. It performs great. Voodoo, what do you think?
It's awesome. And I think another added challenge I would bring in there, flying here in the Arctic, is we're flying over minus 30, minus 30 temps. And so take all that and tactical intercepts or seed. And before you step, you're actually going to change your clothes to something totally different. You're going to wear a silk weight thermals. You're going to wear fleece thermals. Then you're going to put on your G suit. Then you're going to put on your flight suit on, then your G suit. And then you're going to put snow pants over your G suit. And then you're going to put a snow jacket on and then put your JSF jacket on. And then you're going to put on Mucklucks minus 50 rated boots. And at that point, you're so hot, you just want to get out of the building. So we'll walk past the ops desk and we'll walk to the jets in minus 30, minus 40, just because it's easier to stay cool than it is to try and ride in the step van. And you'll get in the jet, and the goal is just not to sweat until you get out there and flying. And so having the jet, that's just an extra challenge of flying up here in Alaska. There's always in Alaska, there's an extra challenge on something. There's this extra layer that just develops that maturity in our aviators and continues to build up those skill sets, because they're considering, hey, I'm flying over these temps. If something were to happen, what's our survival and how do we go through that? And another unique piece of that is we have H-60s that are on alert year round, anytime we're flying out over the Arctic, specifically when it's in those cold temps because of that increased risk. But we're able to do it, and we go out and we still train regardless of it's minus 50. We're still able to go out and train and be ready for that fight, and do those deployments within an hour, or launch would be anywhere in about 8 to 10.
Yeah, that's a great point. So before our pilots can fly here in the winter months, which are extended, they have to go through Arctic Survival School that is conducted here at Eielson, which is fantastic training. Very sobering or chilling, maybe would be the word, because you're out there for a couple nights and surviving down to minus 50, and all you have is your life raft, your single person life raft, and then you build some kind of a shelter over that, and then the second night you actually build a a shelter that you cover up with snow, and you don't sleep, you survive. That is the goal. But that has led to a lot of innovation. So for example, the F-35 seat kit doesn't fit the sleeping bag that our F-16s can fit, which is a nice warm sleeping bag. You can probably actually get some sleep in that thing. But we had to be innovative and come up with something that would fit in the F-35 seat kit that would allow you to survive, if not be comfortable. So the team here was able to do that. They worked with someone in industry to come up with this. It's almost like a full body poncho kind of design. Very thin because it needs to once again fit a seat, but it does keep you warm enough to actually survive that kind of critical 12 hours that we assess we need in order to get that HH-60 with a crow and some PJs out there to pick us up on the range. So all the challenges Voodoo alluded to, they run across the board. Our maintainers have to deal with that every day. All of our mission support people that are out there on the flight line and operating, clearing the snow and ice around the clock, they have to operate in those environments. They have to maintain vehicles in those in that environment, in those conditions. So it is a challenge, but I think it instills that sense of pride, and it comes back to that discipline I talked to, where if you don't do the little things right, you're not going to last long up here.
Well, we're wrapping up here at the end of the hour. I could go on and on about how proud we are of you and every member of the Eielson team. On behalf of Jeff Putnam, who is right there leading our Air and Space Forces Association local chapter, as well as being the region president, I know I speak for him and for all of AFA. We're with you. Our mission clearly states support for airmen and guardians and families with a capital F. And as we also remember our heritage, as we celebrate the 75th anniversary of our Department of the Air Force, you all are building on Billy Mitchell's heritage in a big way, and his vision as he went to Alaska a long time ago and understood that you are in such a strategic position, and now with what I would offer the finest combat aircraft in the world. So thank you so much for your time, and all those who joined us today. Ajax and Voodoo gave us a lot of great insight to think about, and I think all of us can use that knowledge, that background to further educate a public that just unfortunately too much doesn't know a public that needs to know, one, how serious the threats are to the future of our nation's security, and that these two young men leading their forces, their F-35 forces, I promise you every threat is a target, and that's how they look at those who would challenge our nation. So God bless you guys. We love you, and stay in touch. Anything your Air and Space Forces Association can do to support you, we're all in. Thank you.
Thanks, sir. Give them out.
Thank you.